What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. Okay, here with longtime NFL executive and current author, because he is writing books left and right. Football Done Right, Gridiron Genius, and I'm pretty sure he's typing as we speak on something new. Michael Lombardi, how are you doing?
I'm great. No, I'm in a little bit of a research phase. I love doing the research on Football Done Right. That was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about things I didn't know, and so this next book is kind of in the early formative stages. It's going to be about the the last 5 years from 2014 to 2019 at the Patriots when they won three Super Bowls, went to four, lost a conference championship game. I think you have to go back to the mid 70s of the Steeler dynasty to have five of those really productive seasons that they had. So I'm doing a lot of research on that, and it's probably going to be at least 2 years before that thing comes out. But it's fun to do the research, go back and relive each year.
I know you are a football historian, and while I'm younger, I get offended sometimes when like younger analysts or former players act like some of these guys from back in the day couldn't play now. I remember being a GA at Fresno State and meeting Mean Joe Green. And Mike, you know him. I mean, his hands are big as a grizzly bear. If you think that guy wouldn't dominate today,
Oh,
or going to Warriors games and meeting Jerry West, he's not 6'2", guys. I mean, he's 6'8".
yeah.
He'd be fine now.
Yeah, we don't appreciate it. But a lot of that, John, is the league doesn't really do enough job of highlighting some of these guys, that were great. We tend to think everything's great today. And like, you use the example of Joe Green. I mean, Joe Green played at a time where the three technique, the nose tackle, those guys were really the dominant defensive linemen, whether in Merlin Olsen, whether it was, Bob Lilly. Every team had a tackle that could play the run, but could also rush the passer. And they were developing that. And I think we've lost a little bit of that luster, because, the game shift a little bit, Alan Page, I mean, Warren Sapp was one of the elite players. I think people tend to forget that, as great as he was. So, yeah, I don't think we do a good enough job. And some of the coaches, too. Like, I don't think we give them enough credit. And I think that one of the things I've learned over my career, a lot of things I've learned is the answers to most problems are in the past. Everybody thinks that, there's going to be some new formation or some new element or some new design when, the nickel defense, as I wrote about in Football Done Right, was invented by Buddy Parker, who can't get in the Hall of Fame. The 2-minute offense and defense was invented by Buddy Parker, who can't get in the Hall of Fame. And he won 2 titles with the Detroit Lions. So a lot of it, too, is we don't honor those. Like Buddy Parker was up for a vote this year and didn't get in. And like I wrote about in Gridiron, we don't have a criteria for it. Like we have no criteria for who's a Hall of Fame coach. We have a subjective criteria. He is or he isn't. Like if I were to say to you, is Pete Carroll a Hall of Fame coach? People would say, well, he won a Super Bowl, but, I don't know. No, Pete Carroll surely is an NFL. He's a 100%. Hall of Fame coach. He's won a Super Bowl. He had a high winning percentage. He took his team to the playoffs. He lost the Super Bowl. But there's so many different, everybody, George Allen's in the Hall of Fame, didn't win a Super Bowl, only coached 10 years, 70% winning percentage, and Mike Holmgren can't get in. Like it makes no sense, which is probably why most of the people that vote for the Hall of Fame didn't read Football Done Right.
It's funny how the league changes. When I was in the league, a third down back was, just an extra piece, a guy that could quote unquote catch the ball, or the nickel corner was just kind of a throw-in guy who could play in more of a confined area and had to be able to stop the run. Now, if you can't catch the ball out of the backfield, you're not on a roster, right? If you don't have multiple nickel corners, you got no chance. We talk a lot about where things are going because the rule changes are not going to be rolled back to physicality. Would you argue it's only going to become more and more spread out?
Well, I think spread outs also creates problems. Let's talk about Chicago for a second, right? They drafted Dunze in the first round. They don't have a really elite three technique. They don't have an elite inside player, but they chose to go with another receiver who's going to play in the slot. I think, we no longer define anything by downs. Everything's by personnel groupings. And so when you want to spread people out, your tackles have to be really good. Like Darnell Wright, the first round pick, 10th pick overall 2 years ago, he's got to be a really good player if they're going to be able to do that. If he's the right tackle, and who's the left tackle in Chicago. So the more you spread, the more vulnerability you put on the quarterback, the more ability the system has to give the quarterback answers. I'm not sure that every coordinator has that solved. There's always a beater somewhere. I just feel like, I feel like the game's going to go back to being more under center. I think it's going to come back to a little bit of an older school mentality. And only because I think it'll allow more balance within the framework of the offense. You mentioned nickel backs. Look, when I first started in the league, it was the backs criteria was run, catch, block. When we graded a running back, like we didn't grade, Barry Sanders on his blocking ability. We graded him on his running, But today, a running back is block first. If you can't pass protect, you're not playing. You're just not playing.
No.
Catch and run. Running's the last thing the back does, because you can't put him on the field if he doesn't catch, if he doesn't block. So I think you have to stay in tune to that. And we're moving away from first down, second, and third down to what personnel groups on the field. So when you draft the Dunze, you're saying to everybody, we're going to be an 11 team because you got Keenan Allen and you've got DJ Moore. And if a Dunze standing next to Eberflus, was it really worth the first pick in the overall, the 8th pick overall, 9th pick? So I think you have to think of it that way.
Last time I talked to you, your son was working for the Raiders, and he now works for the 49ers. And I know you've talked about back when you worked in Cleveland the second time and you interviewed Kyle Shanahan for the offensive coordinator position, you were blown away. You're like, this guy could be our head coach.
Should have been. Yeah.
Yeah. So you talk about old school football. Obviously, the Harbaugh brothers are a throwback group. I would say Kyle, for being a quote unquote younger coach, is definitely a throwback, his mentality. So far, your son, talking to your son, that experience being around that operation, I heard you talking about this, and it's been well reported that Kyle tapes everything. So every meeting room is videoed and has a live. He can listen to everything from his office, which, I think around the league, people be like, what? But he just wants to know what's going on. And everyone says it's actually works very well. Everyone's on the same page. How's your son's experience been so far?
I think it's been great. He's been really blessed in his career. He starts with Belichick and learns personnel. And then he, works with Jim Harbaugh. Then he comes back at the Jets, and then he goes back with Bill, with Josh McDaniels. He knows that system, and now he's with Kyle. Look, that taping thing started with Walsh back in 1986. I was taping. I can still remember, John, watching Bill install the game plan when we were getting ready to go back to New York and play the Giants in a playoff game. And I was up there taping it, and Coach was going over who we were going to attack in the secondary, how we were going to attack them. And, Herbie Walsh was a safety. We were going to really go after him, UCLA safety. And the second play of the game, we run a slant with Jerry Rice, who gets one-on-one with Herbie, makes him miss just like Coach said he would do in the tape. And then he fumbles the ball when he changes it from one hand to the other, and it goes through the end zone. And then we got off to a 49-3 ass kicking. But that taping was really important because it allowed coaches and it allowed players to, if they missed a meeting or they missed something in a meeting, they can go back and watch it. And it really kept things in tune. And I think it's really important. As I mentioned on my podcast, if I were back in the league, I would tape every personnel meeting, everyone. I would take draft day, and I would go back and watch draft day again, because there's so many things that happen that our memories have a different way of going through it. Like when I think about, I just mentioned Warren Sapp, when I think about the Warren Sapp draft and about, we're sitting there at the 9th pick in the first round, we're talking about taking, Kyle Brady at the tight end because we needed one. And we had moved up, and, and Brady goes right in front of us after, the Jets took Johnny Mitchell the year before. They come back and take Brady the next year. And so there we are sitting with Warren Sapp, and we have this huge trade. Like, I would have loved to have seen that just to go through it. And then later when we moved down, we made a great trade. We moved down to the bottom of the first. We're debating between Curtis Martin and and a linebacker, a Craig Powell from Ohio State, and the rationale how we got to it, that horrible mistake. If we take Martin at 27, 28, whatever it was, we would have gotten a Hall of Fame back. Instead, we got a guy that didn't play. And, and that those are the things you need to analyze. And I think people get so caught up with, well, you're just looking to second guess. No, you're looking to learn.
We are this close to crowning an NBA champ. And with action heating up on the court, it's even hotter at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. There are only so many games left, and DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boost, and so much more. Don't miss out, or you'll have to wait until the next NBA season to place your bets. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your squad, and place your first bet. It's that simple. New to DraftKings? Listen up. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500. Just deposit at least $5, and you'll get a bonus bet back equal to your first bet if it doesn't hit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500 if your first bet doesn't hit. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. You know, it's funny, the draft happens and there's so much hype around the high picks. And I remember being at training camp Purdy's rookie year. And obviously, because of his draft status, they just kind of inserted Trey Lance as the starter. But you could tell Kyle was a little uncomfortable and the players were uncomfortable. And this little guy who's taking third string reps is just making plays. And in the games, in the preseason games, he was, and I understand it was second half preseason, but he was good. And he made the team, and kind of the rest is history. Jared Goff just got a massive contract.
Yeah.
And if you look at the numbers, Purdy's in line, talking to your son, how much they value this guy and the emotional maturity and obviously his physical gifts. But Jared Goff can't move, and he doesn't have the biggest arm. What do you think is the reason for Brock Purdy's success? Is it simply Kyle? I've defended him, and I know you have too. Just watch the guy play. I mean, he's a really good player. He's
got great instincts. His arms tied to his feet. He can anticipate throws. Look, you use the word, they trust him. But just watch the tape. I mean, you watch the tape. They allow him to do things within the framework of that offense that shows they have confidence in his ability to make the plays. They're not calling plays to protect them. I think we don't do, you haven't scouted, probably see this as I see it, but so many times during games, the announcers don't understand that the coach is protecting the quarterback, not being conservative. There's a huge difference between that. Early in the year, Matt LaFleur was protecting Jordan Love. By the end of the year, he was allowing him to play in the game. And so there's a difference between how they call the game and what they do. And I think that you can see from Kyle's play calling, they're not protecting this kid at all. They're letting him play, and they should, because he's really good. We just have a hard time. There's certain movements that I can't explain. There's the Justin Fields movement that has created this sensation in the NFL that no matter, how you look at the evidence, even on the analytical side, you can't get people to believe that he's not a great quarterback yet. And there's no evidence that he is. He's won 10 games. And then there's the Trey Lance conglomerate that just keeps going, that nobody wants to buy into, that, he's not a rhythm thrower. And I don't understand how Brock Purdy isn't like Kurt Warner, a great success story. But for some reason, nobody wants to acknowledge Brock Purdy except for the 49ers.
I think the moment you don't get drafted high, especially way down, in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, no one wants to embrace you. People forget. People talk shit about Tom Brady early. Early on in his career, remember, he was not as good as Payton, even though it was pretty clear early, like the guy was pretty good. If Trey Lance had done what Brock Purdy did his first couple of years, we'd be talking about him like the next John Elway.
Oh my God, it'd be Tim Tebow nausea. It would be over the top. It would be brutal. We'd have to read about it every single day, just like we have to read about that Miami signed Odell Beckham and Stephon Diggs is in Houston. Like they're getting two players that, we don't turn the clock back. We just think they're still great.
Jordan Love, the second half of the season, it's hard. You watch him, you're like, holy shit. But from a financial standpoint, my take has always been I would play it another couple months. I'd have no problem extending him during the season, but I'd like to see a little more before we just give some enormous contract on a really really short body of work. What would be your approach if you were running the Packers when it came to, because you might be able to get them on quote unquote a little discount if you threw a lot of money on him, but if it didn't go
But,
well and he took a step back, you'd be in a little trouble.
well, you have them this year and you got the franchise tag next year. So you have them for 2 years at, whatever number you want them at, right? So you got them at this year because they redid the fifth year, and then you have the franchise number. And let's be clear, if Goff's getting 53 million, then what's Prescott going to get? What's the next guy in line going to get?
Purdy.
Purdy, all of them. Like Purdy's got 2 more years and he can't touch his contract, so you got 2 more years. Plus they have a franchise number they could get Purdy. So they got essentially 3 years built in there to get a contract. And it's only going to go up. But look, let's face it, the revenue streams are going up too.
Yeah.
I think I would be rather patient, but I see enough of love that you believe that he's going to be a good player. I don't think it's about the scoreboard. I think it's about really, if you're Brian Gutekunst, is you want to be able to see one of the Walsh quotes, which is the second year the player's in the system, he becomes better. That's what happened with Kyler Murray, right? Kyler Murray's second year, he didn't really get better. He had the really good beat where he's running around making a lot of plays on loose plays. But once people started to rush him the right way, where they didn't let their ends run up the field, where they closed the pocket down, they forced him to his left if he had to get out, then all of a sudden he wasn't the same player. And so I think what you want to see is what steps does Love take the second years in the system. And once you see that, then I don't think you should hold back. You should go.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. The first car I ever got, I was 16 years old, and my grandpa gave me a ride. And like any young lad who got a car that, let's face it, would not have been my first choice, I had to touch it up a little bit. And we tinted out the windows. We added a big subwoofer to the back, and you could hear me from miles away coming home. My parents sure loved me for that one. So did my neighbors. But I think the key to any young person getting a car is to personalize a little bit, because you're probably not going to get your dream car. And as you get older, you kind of become a car person or you don't. But you definitely have preferences, right? Some of us like bigger cars. I know I do. I've only had big cars, SUVs. And there are certain non-negotiables. I like 3 rows of seats. Now, ideally, I don't have kids right now, so I take out that third row seat, and I like a big, I like a lot of trunk room. Some people, don't like SUVs, like smaller cars. I've never been that big since my high school car of tinting the windows. I don't care if you see me or not, but I know some people, like, the first thing they do is tint the windows. It's crazy. The older you get, I had to have the subwoofers. The subwoofer, I couldn't listen to music for 5 minutes with the subwoofer like I did when I was younger. But there is something very, very special about that first car. I don't care how many cars you get since, how much money you make to get sweeter cars. You never quite forget that first ride and some of the memorable moments that you had in it in your high school years. So with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.
Okay, a couple things on the draft. Do you think the Patriots, clearly they were very dead set on taking a quarterback, but were even more validated when Brian Daboll, who worked with Josh Allen, and then Kevin O'Connell both really wanted Drake Maye, that you can't make that move as a personnel guy if you already like the guy, and those are the two guys that really like your guy as well. It's a no-brainer. You just stick there no matter what. I mean, you're getting offered 11-23 in a future one. That is a lot.
It is, but now the Giants claim they're trying to trade up to get Joe Hall.
Yeah, it's a lie.
Yeah, I mean, but then they made no attempt to trade with the Cardinals to get it. It's unbelievable. Like they think we're actually stupid. Look, I think they were going to pick him whether Brian liked him or not. I think that if you know Elliott and you know his background, size, speed, those are the things. I mean, Maye's intangibles. He'll work hard. Sometimes the job of a scout is to see what other people don't. And if you just grade production, then that's one thing. But you have to be able to see and visualize something moving forward. And I didn't see maybe what Elliott saw as deeply in Maye, or Brian did, or Dayball did, or Kevin O'Connell did. But I think to me that was going to be the pick, no matter if they wanted him or not. There was no way they could trade that. There wasn't the alternative would have been McCarthy, and they had no way of knowing they could get McCarthy. You end up being like a boat out at sea, and without a compass, you don't know if you can get back. So let's hypothetically say they went to 11, right? Now nobody had any thought that Atlanta was going to take Penix at 8. And so now you're trying to get back to get you. What happens if you come out of there with all these picks and no quarterback? Where are you?
Did you see the clip going viral of Jaden Daniels and Drake Maye both throwing basically the same seam route, and Jaden's ball was almost in the guy's hands before Drake, because of his loopy release, kind of got rid of it? And it's just, and I'm all for taking a big swing on a project, but now you have the project and kind of have to fix it. I mean, part of Josh Allen, the project, or Patrick Mahomes, was then that period of time of developing them. And you look at the Patriots, you go, well, new regime. This coach was doing media 5 years ago. He's a linebacker 7 years ago. I mean, this is going to be a big time challenge for that organization with this player, is it not?
Well, the other thing is when you bring Patrick Mahomes into it, right, you knew that Andy Reid was going to be the guy that was detailing the player development of Patrick Mahomes. But in New England, the detailed player development is coming from Alex Van Pelt. And what happened? See, I don't think we asked this question enough. What has to be true for this to be successful? What has to be true for Drake Maye to be a great player? And part of what has to be true is Alex Van Pelt has to do a really good job of developing him, his fundamentals, his techniques, and getting him grooved into the offense. That has to be true, because if he doesn't, then he's going to be all over the board. That's the challenge, right? And so because Mayo doesn't coach offense, defense, or the kicking game, that he just is basically in charge of the team, you could potentially see a new offensive coordinator if things don't go well in a year or two. And now where are you? And now you're changing things again. That's why player development is so reliant upon who the head coach is and what the systems are. And when you're hiring coaches to put their system in and the organization doesn't have one, then you have a lot of propensity to make mistakes.
I thought one of the most laughable pre-draft kind of conversations was the Chargers taking a wide receiver. It's like, have any of you guys watched this guy operate for 15 years? He might have passed on Larry Fitzgerald or Calvin Johnson if they were there, if he thought the offensive lineman was good enough, especially in this wide receiver class. I just don't think people, like, we've all watched him win big without superstar wide. When's the last time Michigan had a star wide receiver? Right. He won in San Francisco with 50-year-old Randy Moss.
Look, Bill Walsh said the last position you fix on your team is the wide receiver position. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's one of the greatest coaches. Has that changed a little bit, though, you think? No, I don't think it's changed at all. I mean, look at Green Bay. Look at Green Bay. Who's got a better receiving core than Green Bay has? I mean, think about it. Everybody says, well, the quarterback, the receivers make the quarterback. Well, look at Green Bay's receiving room. That's pretty freaking good.
Yeah.
And so they're the least amount of money spent on wide receivers in the league. They don't seem to have a problem throwing the football. I don't think it's changed at all. I think it's re-enhanced itself because the offensive lineman is so critical. Look, everybody sits there and says, the receiver makes the quarterback. Now, I know Armand St. Brown, he was a 5th-round pick. He got paid a lot of money, but you tell me how great the receivers are on Detroit. They're good. Hawkinson's good. I mean, they're good. They got players, don't get me wrong. But the reality of the situation is that they are, I mean, Laporta, that they get, they get open, they make plays, the Goff gets them the ball. I don't think it's changed. I mean, look, again, if you're Chicago and you can't protect Caleb Williams, if he's going to get hit and you're an 11, I don't understand it. But look, you get applauded if you take a wide receiver today, because most of the people doing the clapping are Madden fans. They want to play in their it's a Madden game. When the game is won by the teams that can win the line. I mean, Kansas City's traded Tyreek Hill. They've won 2 Super Bowls. Nobody talks about it. I mean, people are talking about Kansas City's going to go back and they're going to win another Super Bowl, and like they act like, oh, well, they got this great receiving room. No, they don't. They got Patrick Mahomes. That's their receiving room.
People ask me a lot, is there anything with the Rice situation that the Chiefs could have done? And I said, well, this isn't college. The moment the season ends, you got some time. And this goes back to the draft where you got to feel comfortable with the player. It's not like they can hold his hand in March, April, and even early May if he's not around the facility. What's your thoughts on just that situation when you get a player with some question marks in the past? The moment the season ends, you kind of just hold on to your ass?
Well, they've been lucky with this, John. They've been really lucky with it. They take Tyreek Hill when he was on nobody's board. I mean, maybe he might have been on Reggie McKenzie's board at the Raiders. I think that was the only other team he was on their board because of his behavior at Oklahoma State. Got thrown out. He couldn't enroll in Akron, couldn't enroll at West Alabama, but he got drafted by the Chiefs. You know, Kelsey had some issues in terms of off the field, which obviously were wrong, but they took him in the 3rd round, right? You know, and they've been able to, Chris Jones, the only reason he's a 2nd round pick is because some people thought he wasn't a hard, all the things off the field. They've been very fortunate of how they built their team of managing this, and it's a credit to them. And so, whatever Rice is within his background was probably there at SMU, and they chose that they felt that they could deal with it. Now, if they don't have Rice, I mean, they take Tony and give up a draft pick. Now, Tony's a guy that, again, does he love football? Is he going to make their room? So now you got Hollywood Brown as their receiver, and you got Worthy, who's 160 pounds. Is he going to be a full-time player? And you got Kelsey at 36 years old. You tell me that receiving room is really good. Hollywood Brown's always been talked about as being a number 1 guy, but he's never produced that way at all.
I think they're a defensive team now, right? Is that
That's right? That's right. That's exactly right. They are, and that's the point of this conversation is that they've changed who they are. They're going to win up front. They have a huge question mark at left tackle, but they're going to get Pacheco more. I mean, Pacheco was carrying the ball 7 more times in the playoffs. After the Christmas Day game, Pacheco's load management increased by 7 carries a game compared to earlier in the year.
Locker room dynamics. I know something you, being around Bill forever, talked a lot about, something that Falcons clearly didn't value in Bill. We've all talked a lot about the Cousins situation from a financial standpoint, but from a locker room standpoint, he can't practice in OTAs. So who's out there taking the reps with a bunch of young, impressionable offensive skill guys? Penix. Penix is not some project. He's like a 6-year starter in college football. The locker room dynamics, and Cousins is a high character guy who's historically a little sensitive. Doesn't this have the chance to get really weird really fast internally, no matter what Raheem Morris can do to talk to the guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it's about the quarterback's personality has to come out in the team. It's in Kansas City. It's in Cincinnati. It's in Buffalo, right? And so, I think there's no question that it's hard to have 2 leaders. I mean, Walsh did this in San Francisco. Remember, he rotated Steve Young and Joe Montana. And finally, Ronnie Lott went to him and said, Bill, we need a starter. We need 1 guy. We need to know who we're counting on. And they went with Montana. Then he traded him after the next season. So, yeah, this never has worked, having 2 quarterbacks. The backup quarterback is got probably most people at the Giants think Tommy DeVito might be better than Daniel Jones. I don't, but I'm just saying that, there could be. So you just created a situation, and then you didn't have – it's 2 years in a row now. You don't help your defense at all. Like, are you watching the NFL? Are you watching the NFL? Do you study the NFL to understand what wins games? Forget about, you draft a running back who's a really good player, but you had Algier there, average 5 yards a carry. You didn't need another running back. Now, I'm sure they're going to blame Arthur Smith for this, but the reality of it is you passed a legitimately great 3 technique, in Jalen Carter. Now, you lived right down the street from him. If you didn't like his character because you know more about him than anybody, okay, maybe that's the case, but I'm not sure that is. And then this year you pass Latua or you pass Byron Murphy. I mean, those are 2 legitimate defensive front guys. So now you're saying you're 29th in the National Football League and forcing turnovers last year, and you're just one player away. Kirk Cousins is going to fix all that for you, and you take Michael Penix. I mean, where's the team building here?
The Jets and the Giants have been mainly terrible for the last decade plus. Obviously, John Morrow's an impressive guy, but it's safe to say he got pretty heavily involved when it came to Daniel Jones. There was a story recently about the Jets wanting to hire a guy over Nathaniel Hackett. To me, a coach or a GM, if you want a new offensive coordinator, you would just fire your offensive coordinator, hire a guy. That feels like a Woody Johnson problem. Do you think the New York teams have an owner meddling issue right now?
Well, I think the Jets clearly do. I mean, when Woody Johnson came out and said that, we're not trading Zach Wilson, and he had comments on all that. Yeah, I do. I think the Jets are different in the sense that they were trying to manage a problem. They're trying to make everybody happy. They were trying to make their offense happy by hiring somebody over Nathaniel Hackett, but make Aaron Rodgers happy by not firing Nathaniel Hackett. And nobody gets made happy anywhere. The Giants, I think, have just been, John has run the team. I've been saying this forever. And I like John. John's a really nice man, a genuinely nice human being. But I think it's a family-run business. And I think they have a hard time of being objective about what they're doing. And they fall in love with players. And when they gave Daniel Jones that money last year for no reason other than the vindication of that they drafted him 6th overall was a mistake. I mean, if you go back and ask one simple question, why did we win and why did we lose? The Giants, when they went to the playoffs, didn't win because Daniel Jones was good. They won because they managed the game. They won in 3 dimensions. They played good offense, good defense, good kicking game. But he didn't carry the team. He didn't carry the team whatsoever. And who was going to sign him to that contract anyway? Who were you competing against?
Nobody. I think if they got a redo, you would have to give Saquon Barkley an extension because the running backs make such little money. It might have been $35 million guaranteed. Franchise Daniel Jones, and you would have been off it this year, and you would have still had the dynamic player at a relatively cheap price because of the deflation in running back contracts, and be rid of Daniel Jones instead of you're stuck with this contract. I don't know about you, Mike. I think they're going to be pretty bad. I mean, I think they're going to really struggle. They don't have a quarterback.
You and I both know that, somebody's going to have a high pick next year, right? I mean, not everybody's
someone's
going 10-7. When you look at Daniel Jones's inability to throw the ball down the field, which has been horrible, right? He's never averaged, John. He's never averaged over 7 yards per attempt in his career. He's never averaged over 7 yards per attempt in his career. So you're asking a guy, he doesn't throw the ball down the field. And there's 1,000 reasons why he can't throw the ball down the field. But you can't win with a quarterback who won't throw the ball. It's one of my biggest concerns. And I was a huge Trevor Lawrence fan. But Lawrence doesn't throw the ball up the field either. It's a huge concern. But one of the things is Warren Sharp put this out. And, this is based off of clutch quarterbacks with the last 5 minutes since 2000. Okay. And you have to have at least 45 minimum attempts in this category. And when you go through it, I mean, Daniel Jones is 42nd out of 56. Davis Mills is actually ahead of him. Mac Jones is ahead of him. Mike Glennon, Andy Dalton's ahead of him. Carson Wentz is ahead of him. Kenny Pickett's actually ahead of him. So, I don't understand how anybody thinks that this guy is going to be good, and now he's coming off of a neck injury. I think it's a problem. I don't think they're good either. I think they're changing what they're doing defensively. They want to play Tampa. They want to play bend but don't break. They're going to be trying to stay within the game and not blitz and do all that. Okay. But at some point, you want to get off the field, you got to play man-to-man. And you got to have to pressure the passer.
Totally agree. I went back and looked at some clips of Bo Nix the other day. And I was around Derek for a little bit at Fresno State. And obviously when Jimmy came out, watched some of his college stuff. I see some similarities with those two guys. And historically, that type player usually went somewhere between 30 and 50, kind of in that range. In this new world we live in, he ends up going in the top 15. But why can't that work? Why wouldn't he work with Sean Payton? When you look at some of these guys, I mean, Jaden Daniels is going to a defensive head coach with Cliff Kingsbury, who I know he gets a lot of hype. It seems like a nice guy, but he's not really my style and offensive coordinator. You got Drake Maye going to a defensive head coach. Even Caleb Williams going to a defensive head coach. This guy gets to go to Sean Payton and his skill set, accuracy, timing, getting rid of the ball. I actually came away thinking everyone's talking a bunch of crap about this pick. I'm like, I actually think it might have a chance to have a little success.
Well, I have faith in Sean Payton. He's developing the player. Again, it goes back to who's developing the player. And that's the critical component of this whole conversation is who is doing that. And Sean's going to do what's right for the offense, what's right for the quarterback. One of the things people don't understand about Sean's offense is what he couldn't get Russell to do is to he programs it so the quarterback is, I don't want to call him robotic, but there's a level of roboticness in the play. You move your feet to this area, you throw the ball here. Everything is feet, arm coordinated, which is what Bo Nix was really good at doing. You could see it in Oregon tape. His feet and his arm were tied together. And so because of it, Sean's going to call the game, and so that he sets him up for success. And I think it will work. I'm not, look, I think what the biggest misconception is every when you say a quarterback has to be managed, that's like a knock. It's not. Every quarterback, with even Patrick Mahomes at times last year, turned the ball over way too much. They cut back on that. You got to run the right system for the player to enhance his skill set, and then the player looks better. Look at Goff in the Detroit system, when Goff was playing in the Rams system. What's the difference between Goff in Detroit and Goff in Los Angeles? The line in Detroit. If Goff gets hit earlier in the game, it ain't going to be good whether you pay him $53 million or whether you pay him $13 million.
Well, he's like Cousins.
You got to protect Goff,
right? He can't move.
You got to protect Goff.
Yeah,
and you got to give Goff. You got to protect Goff, and you got to give him answers. And where the Rams were spending money, that line started to fall apart. And when they didn't have that, he started getting hit, and that bothered him.
I'm gonna get you out of here on this. I get asked a lot by young people, as I'm sure you do, just career advice, just big picture stuff. And you've had a lot of success in your career. You've been around arguably the most successful people in the history of the NFL. Your sons are working at a high level. And my take always is the faster you can do what you're passionate about, because you're going to have to work to be successful at whatever a lot. So it's so much easier to work when you enjoy what you're doing, because eventually work becomes work. When people ask like, hey, I'm young, I'm not quite sure, I want to work in football, or, I don't really love my job. What's just a good, just big picture advice you try to give to younger people trying to make their way in this crazy world?
Find your passion early. Don't worry about making money. And remember that wisdom doesn't come from experience. It comes from learning and education. And become an educated football person and study the game, study the history of the game, learn the game from all levels, not just from one point of view. And you got to keep learning the game every single day, because if you don't, it's going to pass you. And I think that's really what it comes down to. I think you have to be willing to sacrifice short-term money for long-term gain.
Do you think that's a similarity that most successful people have? They're not as consumed young with money.
Yeah.
It's about the big picture.
Yeah. You got to have a passion, right? Like you got to believe in what you're doing. You got to love it, because you're going to go to work and it's not going to be fun some days where, because you're losing because of the outside noise. It's not because it's not fun. It's just you have to listen to the outside noise, the people that have no idea what they're talking about, that have all these opinions.
Well, Michael, I appreciate the time, and
anytime, John.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Have a great week, and enjoy
you too,
the summer.
Buddy. Appreciate it.